everyone! In today's video, I will be showing you how to make lava buns. These buns are popular dessert at dim sum restaurants. In fact, these are my husband's must-have every time we get dim sum. These little pillow-soft buns are filled with a rich and gooey center that oozes out as soon as you bite into them. Warning before I get started, these buns are extremely addicting and filled with calories, so eat them at your own discretion. Since we are all under quarantine at the moment, I decided to show you two ways of making this dessert. The first is the traditional white bun that you find in restaurants. However, that dough calls for a low-protein flour, which can be hard to find right now. So I decided to show you another version that only uses 3 ingredients for the dough. I am calling the second version my Shelter-in-Place lava buns. I hope you find this helpful. Now let's get started. For the lava bun filling, you will need 3 cooked salted duck egg yolks. I steamed mine. 50 grams of ghee. You can also use butter or coconut oil instead of ghee. 30 grams of powdered sugar. 40 grams of milk powder. And 30 milliliters of milk. Don't worry, I will have the full recipe and ingredient list in the description box below. Using a fork, mash up your cooked salted duck egg yolks. This is easier to do when they're still hot. Add in the ghee and mix well. Like I said earlier, you can use butter or coconut oil instead. Ghee is basically clarified butter, so it has less lactose than butter. I find that it gives it a richer taste, but it also has more calories than butter, so choose your poison. Then add in your powdered sugar and milk powder. Make sure to give it a quick mix in between each ingredient. Finally, add in your milk. Mix all ingredients until they are well combined. Then place the mixture in your freezer for about 10 minutes to harden up. 10 minutes later, take the mixture out of the freezer. Using a half tablespoon, scoop out a rounded heaping half tablespoon per filling. This mixture should give you 12 fillings total. Form mixture into rounded balls and place them back into the freezer until ready to use. Now onto the dough. For the dough, you will need 40 grams plus another 150 grams of cake flour, 3/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast, 30 grams of powdered sugar, half teaspoon of baking powder, 10 grams of coconut oil, you can also use butter, 40 milliliters plus another 60 milliliters of water. In a small bowl, dissolve your active yeast in 40 milliliters of water. Make sure to mix well enough where you can no longer see clumps of yeast. Once the yeast has dissolved, add in 40 grams of cake flour. Mix this into a wet sticky paste. Set aside to proof for 30 minutes. I like to proof all of my dough in the oven. Make sure your oven is off. I then turn on the oven light to create a controlled warm place. My dough comes out perfect every time I proof using this method. 30 minutes later, combine 155 grams of cake flour with powdered sugar and baking powder. Give it a quick whisk, then mix in the remaining 60 milliliters of water and your proofed dough. Mix the ingredients well using a spatula, then start kneading the dough with your hands. Once everything is combined, fold in your coconut oil. Take the dough out of the bowl and start kneading by pushing the dough away from you using the palm of your hand, then using your other hand to pull and fold the dough back. Repeat this motion until the dough becomes supple and no longer sticky. If your dough continues to be sticky, adding a little more cake flour. If it is too dry, adding a little bit more water. You can also do this step in a stand mixer. However, the beauty of this dough is it does not require a lot of kneading, so I find it easier to do it by hand. Also, kneading the dough is a great stress reliever and a good workout for my arms. I like to think I'm burning calories so I can make more room for these yummy desserts. This dough only took about 8 minutes to come together. Once your dough is ready, roll it into a log and cut into 12 equal portions. You can use a scale if you want to be exact, I just eyeball it. Place your dough under a towel to keep from drying out. Taking one piece at a time, pull the edges of the dough toward the middle, then roll on the counter to form a round ball. Repeat this for all 12 pieces. Now we are ready to assemble. Take a piece of the round dough, flatten it down with the palm of your hand into a flat disc. Using one hand to roll your rolling pin, while using your other to rotate the dough. Make sure you only roll the outer edge of the dough. The center should be plump and fat, while the outer edge should be thin. If you roll out the dough evenly, when you fold the bottoms together, it will create a very thick layer of the dough at the bottom, while the top will be much thinner. By keeping the outer edge thinner than the center, you're ensuring the top and bottom of the dough will be even. Place a frozen filling in the center of the rolled out dough, then crimp and fold the edges together. Roll it on the counter on your hand to make sure all edges are sealed. This is very important. You do not want the filling to leak out when cooking. Place your finished buns in a cupcake liner. Make sure you cover your finished buns so they do not dry out while you're finishing the rest. Repeat this step until all the buns are completed. Place all completed buns in the steamer and let it rest for 40 minutes. After this proofing process, if you want to freeze some of the buns, this is the stage to do so. I like to put them in muffin baking trays to keep them separated, cover the buns with a plastic wrap to prevent cracking, and freeze them for an hour before placing them into a freezer bag. When your water is boiling, steam the buns on high for 6 minutes and they are ready to eat. Now let me show you how I make my shelter-in-place lava buns. You only need 3 ingredients for this dough. You will need 1 cup cooked sweet potato. I steamed mine, but you can also use baked. 1½ to 2 cups of all-purpose flour and ½ tablespoon of dry active yeast. Mix the yeast into your sweet potato. Make sure your sweet potato is at room temperature. If it is too hot, it will kill the yeast. If the sweet potato is too cold, it might take you longer to activate your yeast. Start by adding 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Mix it all together with a spatula, then start kneading the dough with your hand. Once the dough is coming together, take it out the bowl and start the kneading process. Because the moisture content in your sweet potato is not the same each time, I cannot give you the exact quantity for how much all-purpose flour you will need. While kneading the dough, if you find the dough still sticks to your hand, keep adding more flour until the dough becomes supple and smooth and no longer sticky. While this dough only uses 3 ingredients, it is a longer process and a lot more work than the previous version. If you have cake flour around, I would suggest using the first recipe. It is more foolproof. But in a pinch, this is a great recipe to know, not only for lava buns, but this is also a great mental recipe, which is a plain steamed bun people usually eat in China for breakfast. The kneading process for this dough is a lot longer than the first one. However, I do not recommend using a stand mixer for this dough. Because the amount of flour needed will depend on your sweet potato, you will need to actually touch the dough to decide if more flour is needed. This process usually takes between 13 to 15 minutes of kneading. Once the dough is supple and smooth, form it into a ball. Coat your bowl with some oil. Please use a flavorless oil. I used vegetable oil here. Rub the oil over your dough to prevent sticking. Then cover the bowl with a towel or plastic wrap and leave it in your oven with the light on to proof. Please make sure the oven is not on. You will need to proof this for 2 to 3 hours or when the dough has doubled in size. Once the dough is done proofing, you can see how puffy it got. I find the proofing process so fascinating. My favorite part is punching down the dough. It's very satisfying. Take it out of the bowl and start kneading again. During the proofing process, your dough will become sticky again, so adding half tablespoon of flour at a time and keep kneading until the dough is no longer sticky. This will only take a few minutes. Once the dough is ready, cover with a towel to prevent it from drying out. Taking a scale, measure out around 35 grams of dough per bun. Because this dough is fluffier than the original version, I like to make these a little bigger so there's slightly more dough to filling ratio. This will help prevent the filling from oozing out of the bun when steaming. Roll each piece into a ball just like the first recipe. Make sure you keep everything covered under a towel. The filling recipe for this version is the same, except I used 25 milliliters of milk instead of 30. This will make the filling more of a melted custard texture. The filling is also slightly smaller. Instead of a heaping rounded half tablespoon, it is just half tablespoon. All of these steps are taken to ensure the filling does not ooze out during the cooking process. You are going to roll out the dough and assemble the buns the exact same way as the previous version. This dough is more supple than the original, so it is actually easier to roll out and fold. Remember to only roll out the outer edges, leaving the center thicker. Once again, freeze any you do not want to cook right away. Make sure your water is boiling. Steam these on high for 10 minutes. And voila, here are your ShelterInPlace lava buns. As you can see, the filling in this bun is a little thicker and the dough is very fluffy.
Okay, choose one to eat.
Which one do you want to eat? That one? Here, I'll help you. It's hot. Which one do you want, Sophie? That one?
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, make sure you open it first, okay?
Bon appetit, we bake these.
You bake these?
No.
What did you say?
Look at this.
What did you just say, Savannah?
Lovely.
Bon appetit.
Hot. Bon
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Gold.
All right. High five.
You want to say any last words, Savannah?
Not those. Those are not words.
How about tell us a knock knock joke? Who's there?
Toe.
Toad who?
Toe.
Tofu.